West Virginia Foodways. Presented here are my major points of this talk. I'll start with the background on my research and move to my research questions, methods and results, discussing the cost of hunting, my conclusions, and then future directions. So to start, a background on wild game. Big game species in the eastern United States consist of white-tailed deer, black bear, elk, and wild pig that are categorized as invasive species. These species provide lucrative recreational activities as well as being a source of subsistence for some. We are also witnessing the decline of hunting rates nationally due to factors such as domestic food production and increased urbanization. So, to translate this to West Virginia food landscape, West Virginia has one of the highest rates of food insecurity in the United States. When you travel to the southern part of the state, the food insecurity rate rises to 17%, where if you highlight certain areas such as McDowell County, this area has the highest food insecurity rate in the counties nationally. This work of mine was done with assistance from the Food Justice Lab of West Virginia University. The research was done, from the research they do on domestic food production and access and equity. They found from their research that low income and people of color remain vulnerable within the West Virginia food system and are often largely forgotten. So this is where my research will pick up and lay the groundwork and promote dialogue on the role of wild food harvesting in West Virginia. So I asked from my project, my research questions were, what are the rates of wild game harvesting in West Virginia, and specifically, how do these rates compare to adjacent states? And secondly, I asked, how does domestic meat production compare to wild game harvesting in West Virginia? And finally, I asked, what factors influence wild game harvesting in the most food insecure portion of West Virginia, that is the southern counties? So my methods to attain the wild game harvest rates were I collected wild game harvest rates for all big game species from 2012 to 2016. I then estimated the biomass for each species, which equaled out to 60 pounds for white-tailed deer, 100 pounds for black bear, 45 pounds for wild pig, and in West Virginia there are no elk hunting. So I then calculated 5-year averages for pounds of big game harvest for West Virginia and the adjacent states of Pennsylvania, Virginia, Maryland, Ohio, and Kentucky. And then finally, I calculated a 5-year average per capita rate for big game in each state. So moving on to my findings for this. On the graph on the left on figure 1, you see that West Virginia in the orange bar has relatively a medium of the group harvest rates out of all the states. But then if you move to the graph on the right, figure 2, you see that West Virginia far exceeds all the states in the group for per capita pounds of wild harvested game, with over 3.5 pounds of meat per capita. Moving on to my second research question and how I answered that through my methods. First, a background. For domestic meat in the state, 95% are exported out of state, and the domestic meat processed in West Virginia include cattle, goat, sheep, and pork, and the wild game species in West Virginia remain the same. They include white-tailed deer, black bear, and wild pig. So I compared the processed pounds of domestic meat to pounds harvested from wild game from the years 2000 to 2016, and I ended up with this chart showing the difference in pounds of harvested wild game versus domestic meat per year. As in the orange bar, the wild game harvested game exceeds the domestic meat in the blue bar for 12 out of the 17 observed years. Moving on to the final research question I have. I looked in the southern portion of the state, which are the 9 counties of Logan, McDowell, Mingo, Mercer, Boone, and Wayne. So The state is relevant, this portion of the state is relevant because they have the highest rates of poverty and food insecurity, and for context, there are no grocery stores in the county of McDowell. So, how do these residents interact with wild food, and what are the roles going on? And also, it's important to note that this area is home to abundant extractive processes such as mountaintop removal and timbering. So, my methods for the southern portion of the state in the data collection were I collected land ownership data for private versus public land and corporate land ownership. I also collected poverty and employment rates by county, 5-year average year harvest rates, which included the state average versus the non-southern counties. Then I also compared the unemployment rates to the year harvest rates. This is the chart I created to show the comparison for the private land in the counties and also the amount of corporate land owned. As you can see, counties such as Wyoming, Mingo, Logan, Lincoln, and Boone are almost privately owned. The amount of corporate land owned in these regions varies some, but generally they are extremely high. Next, there are a collection of charts I created. The top left, figure 5, shows the percent in poverty for the state average in orange and the non-southern counties in blue. As you can see, there's only one county that is below the state average in poverty rate for the selected grouping. Figure 6 on the right shows the unemployment rate and the state average in orange again, and the non-southern counties in blue. This chart yielded results that were generally a mix. There was some higher, some lower. There was really no overall consensus. The bottom left, in figure 7, state average in orange again, yields over 100,000 pounds of wild game difference for the state compared to the non-southern counties. And finally, on these collection of charts, I compared the unemployment rate to deer harvest rates with a line graph. And there ended up being a 0.89 correlation between the unemployment rate and the count of harvested deer. So, as you can see, as the unemployment rate goes down, the amount of wild harvested game increases. So, now I want to discuss the cost of hunting. As civilians in Southern Virginia face this kind of like decision processing every day, deciding whether they want to start self-provisioning and create their own basic hunting operation. So, to start your own basic hunting operation, you would need a hunting license, a rifle, and ammunition, and then also to have a deer tag and process the animal post-harvest. And there are also time costs associated with harvesting of wild animals. You have to enroll in a hunter safety course. You have to spend a good amount of time in the field actually pursuing the animal, and also there are transportation costs in the amount of time it takes to get to and from the area. So for a new hunter that wants to explore their possibility of self-provisioning through wild game, it would cost them around $600 for a 3-deer harvest scenario. And that's very significant for counties in this area because that is 10% of their income during hunting seasons. So, to start addressing some of my conclusions, for the first research question, I asked, what are the rates of wild game harvest in West Virginia? As you can see, West Virginians harvest big game at relatively high rates, but when it comes to per capita rates, West Virginia is the highest in the area by far. My second research question asked, how does domestic meat production compare to wild game harvesting in West Virginia? We saw that wild game harvest rates exceeded domestic meat production and processing in West Virginia for the observed years. To expand on this a little further, it's apparent that West Virginia is being used as an export state when it comes to domestic meat. This creates inequalities in the state since we're allocating many resources to produce all this domestic meat, but it's the civilians are not seeing the benefits from all the meat that are created and produced in the state. For my last research question, I asked the question of what factors influence wild game harvesting in the most food insecure region of West Virginia? From my preliminary analysis, we saw that there are high amounts of private and corporate land ownership. This is significant because, as you can see, this sign on the slide is prevalent in many areas in the southern part of the state and the private areas because they will often pursue prosecution if you're found hunting, trespassing, or hiking on that land. There are also other factors such as unemployment and monetary and time costs that can deter hunting activities and for civilians in this area. So some proposed future directions for my research would be to investigate barriers to hunting in food insecure areas by doing a qualitative analysis. Also, determine the possibilities for increasing wild game harvesting in suitable areas. This could be done by possible elk restoration in the southern coalfields, since currently there is no elk hunting in West Virginia. Also, I could get a better understanding of wild game food networks in the southern part of the state by possibly exploring a wild game meat economy. And finally, a proposed future direction would be to do an environmental and health comparative analysis of domestic meat versus wild game. This would include a very extensive study of carbon footprint for these two practices, domestic meat versus wild game, and also a nutritional comparison between domestic meat and wild harvested game. And these are my acknowledgments. And thank you all so much.
Okay, we still have quite some time left. So.
I have a question for Kaleb actually. With the southern portion of West Virginia and that super high private land ownership, those super high private land ownership rates, coupled with the high poverty rates, have you looked into, or do you plan to look into the relationship between those two things at all? Like, is the land, which obviously a large percentage is corporate owned, but as far as non-corporate private land ownership, how does that relate to the high poverty rates in the county? Like, is it a few individuals that are, own massive chunks of land and it's restricted access?
For the high swaths of private land in southern counties, usually like the Boone, Lincoln County, and Wyoming County, they do have a large amount of corporate land, and the remainder is just like independent privately owned. But typically the land is either old extractive practices, timbering, mining, it's just been left abandoned. So that's like, it's an absentee ownership. So people that aren't living in the state will reap the benefits of the natural resources, but they aren't there to actually like utilize the land. So it's kind of left land that's accumulating money, but there is no chance to really access it.
When you were using statistics about the harvest rate, where does that number come from? And how accurate do you think that is? Because a lot of hunting in Japan is, for example, it's not considered harvest. I mean, there's a lot of wildlife management that's going on because of the wildlife damage that is a huge concern for farmers in Japan. And so that's kind of what I thought of when you were saying expanding care ethics. If it's feeding wildlife, I don't know if it will become a negative thing. But how did you get the harvest rate, and how accurate do you think that is? And based on how accurate you think that is, how do you think it expands to your understanding of how the Southerners are interacting with hunting?
For our data collection, we just got the harvest rates from the USDA. The West Virginia DNR. They post the annual report for the harvest rates for the counties, and then from that we believe it's pretty accurate because they have a detailed spreadsheet of male deer, female deer, and then the unknown deer that are killed that they can't actually identify. So then obviously we'll either take that to if we're doing a study to show the pounds, we'll do that by the estimated biomass, and if not, we're just comparing the total rates, and we'll just use the DNR data. But it's generally pretty accurate, and answer the question of how that interacts with the southern counties. So are you trying to ask like how they interact with wild game in the southern, or?
Well, since this is kind of like an informal formal,
Yes.
If there is hunting that is being done that is not accounted for.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we treat that as like an illegal practice. Like,
of course.
we really can't quantify how much that's going on. But and there's really no data to report how much of that is happening. So, but I mean, if you go from our study, then a lot of people in Southern Virginia don't even have access to even hunt to begin with, because they don't have the monetary, necessities to be able to purchase the rifle and even the ammunition. So, I mean, that's kind of maybe a further study to maybe more use of qualitative analysis to ask people if they are actually, how much do you poach, how much do you actually report your kill. So that would be like a future direction possibly.
Touching on a lot of legal issues, it's probably difficult.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
So we showed that graph that showed that with decreasing unemployment, hunting goes up. So while hunting seems to be one source that could be used for subsistence, that kind of suggests that maybe money is a barrier to that. And you think how could that be addressed? I mean, the idea of just making rifles cheaper or subsidizing them, I don't know. But
Yeah, that really wasn't like trying to create a program to like, I guess, supplement rifles to citizens isn't really our aim for that. So to address maybe like the people who can't access the necessary tools to begin hunting, that's what we would try to implement, like a wild game market, or even like supplemental meal programs that could be given to food pantries in the area. Since the people with the high unemployment rates can't access the deer, we can maybe find a way to help them reach their family needs, so they can receive the sustenance that their family that they need.
Do you think that something like the landscape stewardship program, where you have professionals who provide some kind of a little bit of training, and you don't have just recreational hunting, but you have kind of people who could maybe supply some of their livelihood by caring for the system and for the local ecosystem?
Yes,
taking and giving to the tenant?
Because there's literature that shows once you create wildlife management areas, if you create them near like open roads or open trails that are relatively like close to that source, that the harvest rates will actually increase, because a lot of hunters, if they can get a deer right near the beginning where their hunting site is and not have to take it out very far, that they're going to pick that other than having to drag a deer miles and miles in the forest. So there are obviously like future directions would be to create a forageable ecosystem in these areas to increase wildlife populations, and also there's literature suggesting to create cropped areas next to the wildlife management areas, so that's even increased forageable foods for the deer that would help cultivate its population and hopefully supplant a nice healthy ecosystem that these deer could use and people could harvest the meat from and get the nourishment they need.
There's a Hunters for the Hungry program in West Virginia that donates a lot of the meat, but it's not kind of a formalized program that works in conjunction with the food systems of West Virginia. And so this work is really kind of beginning to ask that question of like, what can wild food and the practice that already is happening at a relatively high rate, how can that be included in the food systems and supplying people with food? But yeah, it's a really good question of how to bring this into a more formal way in which people who are food insecure can access this resource. Great job.
Kaleb, you just finished your first talk at a conference. How does it feel?
Feels like I need some food or a drink.